Well, good afternoon. On behalf of Bishop Marianne and the rest of the EDOW staff, I welcome you to the Diocese of Washington's School for Christian Faith and Leadership. We are so glad that you are here today. Today's a rich opportunity to learn from our missioner for revitalization, Reverend Todd Thomas, and his interviewee, the Reverend Katie Nakamura-Rengers, as they discuss mission and vision, one of the key signs of parish vitality. And now I'll turn it over to the Reverend Todd Thomas.
Good morning again, everyone, and thank you, Emily, for getting us started. If you haven't met Reverend Emily Snowden yet, she is on staff with us now, supporting as program coordinator for the School for Christian Faith and Leadership, and graciously agreed to be our digital host for our Tuesday Lunch and Learns. We're going to jump right in, but I wanted to begin our hour together with a prayer. And I actually labored over choosing between many different liturgical prayers to do that, and finally decided that we might just lift by name this morning our dear sister, Bishop-elect Paula Clark, and her health, and all the unnamed others on our hearts and minds today. It seems to be a season of growing prayer lists, at least for myself. So I thought we might bless our lunch together and also lift those up with the Book of Common Prayers, prayer for those we love. So let us pray. Saving and glorious God, we thank you for lunch, for these friends and colleagues, sisters and brothers with whom we share it. Bless our time together and open our hearts and minds to you, to one another, and to your beloved world around us. And we pray, Almighty God, we entrust all who are dear to us to your never failing care and love, especially our dear Bishop-elect Paula Clark, and with all those on our hearts, minds, and prayer lists for this life and the life to come, knowing that you are doing for them better things than we can desire or pray for. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Now, our lunch hours together are not really meant to be webinars or classes, but hopefully we meet around our digital lunch table and collect our wisdoms, resources, and experiences into an action item or two for each of us to take away from the table. As your host each week, I'm going to jumpstart the conversation with short interviews and interactions, some pre-recorded and some live. Emily, let's cue up the video, but not start it just yet. Today's interview is pre-recorded, so you can listen and have a few moments to eat as I chat with Reverend Katie Nakamura-Rengers. Feel free and invited to drop questions and comments into the chat for us to pick up afterward. Reverend Katie is an amazing priest, church planner, friend, and all-around great human being. And Emily, we can start that video now.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Reverend Katie, and for everybody who is joining us in the Lunch and Learn today. I am with Reverend Katie Nakamura-Rengers. She is the staff officer for church planning in Bishop Curry's office. And we have crossed paths lots of time and done some work together in the Genesis New Episcopal Communities work and effort. And we're going to be talking about mission and vision today. So thank you so much for joining us, Katie.
Yeah, thanks, Todd.
So, Katie, you work with teams and folks across the world who are looking to plant new churches and create new Episcopal communities. Mm-hmm. And when they do that, they're going to have to wrestle with mission and vision somewhat. Can you talk about why that's important and how mission and vision works into creating a new community?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have planted a church before. And so I know that some of the personality of a church planter can tend to be very focused on a vision for what kind of church they want to plant. That's like absolutely how I was. I wanted to plant a church that also functioned as a coffee shop and sort of did evangelism in this neighborhood. And what I learned the hard way, and I think some of our other church planters are learning the hard way, but perhaps more easily as well, is that before we can really focus on that, what we want to do, or we need to think about why are we doing this at all? What's the compelling witness of the gospel that's telling us to go out into uncharted territory or into a neighborhood where there is no Episcopal presence, and be the church, be the body of Christ in that place. What is like our compelling why? In some ways, we can say that in church planting, this question is really important because the work is so risky and so hard. I think something like probably 75% of church plants across denominations fail. Maybe it's even higher than that. And so having a firm sense of why, our purpose, and vision, mission, helps us cope with success and failure, and really see like a deeper picture of what it is that we're trying to do. So we really push that, right? Before you start thinking about the what, are we going to be handing out water bottles in the 100-degree Alabama summer? Are we going to be starting a coffee shop? Are we going to have really amazing music? Before we think about that what, we want to think about why. I think part of that is looking around in a new church start and saying, we're locating in a completely different and new community, where that's not already touched by an Episcopal church. And so we talk to people about doing a lot of work with, not just with why, but with who. We might have an idea of who we think is in this neighborhood, but until we hit the pavement running, sitting in some local coffee shops, listening to people's stories, sitting on park benches, just watching who passes by and starting up some unplanned conversations. What is it that you love about this neighborhood? What is it that worries you about this neighborhood? Gosh, if there was a spiritual community in this neighborhood, what benefit would that bring? Until we hit that pavement running and see the lived need and just the lived life of people, it's hard to get a church started. So I think who feeds into the why and into the mission.
Yeah, I love that. I am in why conversations a lot, but I'm not always in who conversations. And just so everybody knows, this isn't really a lunch when we're going to be talking about planting new churches. We are mostly all serving existing churches. We're all serving existing churches. And we're going to pivot a little bit to that. But, when you're dealing with an existing church or serving an existing church, the who can change, can't it? Right. I mean, it's not always the same as when the church got started in a location.
Oh, I think that's the story of many of our existing congregations. I mean, we've got congregations here in Alabama that were planted 100 years ago. And I know that in your diocese, there's probably congregations that are way older than that, right?
Yeah, that's like a young one, yeah.
yeah, that's 100 years old would be young. And neighborhoods change, demographics change. We see a number of Episcopal churches that got started, 1920 in the industrial age. And that neighborhood looked one way, and then now they're looking out their stained glass windows and realizing that it's become a majority immigrants, or a majority Latinx, or a majority white hipsters.
Right.
And so those places where God has planted us do change. And so it can always be a healthy exercise to do some prayer walking and get to know, who are the new faces? Who are our new neighbors that God has given us to love and to serve alongside with in this neighborhood?
Awesome. I love that. So along with our why and our who, are there other things that you would want to have in mission and vision for a church? To develop in those statements? Yeah,
I found that one of the important conversations to have with a team in a church plant, maybe you call that a core team, but in an established place, a vestry, is a conversation about who is Jesus, right? We have 4 gospels, and all 4 of those gospels portray Jesus in a slightly different way. And I like to think about that when I think about congregations, because each of our congregations portrays Jesus and sort of embodies Jesus in slightly different ways. So we have congregations that might describe Jesus as the healer, others who would talk about, Jesus the miracle worker, or Jesus the teacher, Jesus the social prophet. And we're each called to manifest different emphases of who Jesus is. And yet it can be so helpful in coming up with that, what is our mission? Like, what is our vision? start with a conversation about, well, who is Jesus to us? Can we, maybe we can't land on like the perfect sentence that every single person in our congregation would agree with, but maybe we can come up with like a common portrait of the Jesus we're trying to convey to the world, and that our neighborhood needs us to reflect back.
Wow. So I love that. And because one of the things we use, one of the tools we have in our diocese is Mission Insight. And the diocese provides this to all our parishes to read the demographics around their buildings in different communities, different radiuses and things. And one of the fascinating things about that is the mosaic groups identified in those. We also have a handbook that lays out lots of things about those different demographic groups. But one of them is the kind of leader they look for. And as you were describing Jesus in those different ways, they often look for spiritual leaders or church leaders along those same kind of lines. Some look for vision movements and visioners. Some look for sort of like the pastoral, the shepherd. Some look for the CEO, educated and making decisions and teaching. And yeah, I felt a parallel thing there going for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that can kind of get lost in the shuffle is that mission and vision are really contextual. And you know, I see a lot of vision and mission statements on church websites, and some are, I think, sort of rely on Book of Common Prayer, baptismal covenant language in a way that makes them too vague. I mean, you know, I think in our catechism, it says something like the mission of the church is to reconcile all people to God and our neighbors, which is amazing. That should be all of our mission, right? But we have to live out that mission in different ways and in different contexts.
Right.
So yeah, the vision for how to do that reconciling is going to look very different here in Birmingham, Alabama, because of our history and context and who's living here, than it will in San Francisco or in New York City or in Washington, D.C. So we want to get a little bit more specific to our context, and thinking about how we'll then take that vision and mission and turn it into practice that makes sense in our communities.
Awesome. And you know, context is something that is shared both by new church plants and new Episcopal communities and established churches and established communities. So maybe to pivot a little bit, can an established church sort of take on a new Episcopal community mindset when they revamp and review and present their mission and vision?
Gosh, I think so. And I mean, we're living in this amazing moment. I mean, the last year has not been amazing in terms of like the pandemic and all, but in terms of opportunity to say we've to some degree are able at this moment to push a restart button. And to some degree, we're all, this Easter felt like it was sort of the moment of starting to open church doors, come back together to some degree in person and worship, although that's going to be a gradual process. But it's really certainly like a moment for us to spend some time outdoors, outside the doors of our church, and say, gosh, maybe this neighborhood has changed over the last year. I know that the neighborhood that my church plant is in has changed. Some restaurants have closed. A lot of houses have been sold and bought. The homeless community has turned over, and a lot of that's happened like while I've been here in my home office, and our other church members have as well. And so this is that moment where, you know, the sun is coming out and we're able to peep outside and start to say, okay, you know, who are our neighbors? And we can do that without any shame, because this pandemic really has turned things on its head and closed us off from the world. So I think in that sense, it is time for established churches to think a little bit more like church plants and say, whoa, you know, this is this moment of grand new adventure. Let's go out and see what's going on. You know?
Right. And emerging from the pandemic, like you said, businesses have changed. Housing has changed, and that's going to vary from context to context. So you can't take it for granted, but there's so much to learn now about the changing and emerging context in which we're in. And I was reading last week a book called The Strategically Small Church, and it's like a decade old, But wow, it was fantastic to read through some of the identifiable strengths that smaller faith communities have and can leverage, especially in changing contexts. I would like to ask too, I threw out earlier when we were having our conversation before we started recording, the idea of maybe the mission and vision team for a church act like a new church plant, act like maybe that there's not a church here. So why in the world would they put one there? And some of those questions like you brought up for us, what kind of value that would have for a parish?
Wait, say that question again.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't quite track it.
Right. So let's say a parish decides we're going to revamp our mission and vision statements.
Yeah.
And so what do? We make a committee to do that. We make a working group to sit down and work on those. What if they viewed themselves as a church plant team instead of just a committee to review statements, and did their work as though there were not an Episcopal church there, but there was going to be one at that site?
Right.
We answer some of those questions of who is Jesus, who is around us, why would we even be here, and what would we do, how that might change, separated from some of the other baggage and history and wonderful history that we carry as parishes.
Yeah, and I feel like we were talking about how refreshing it would be for a team like that to really do some work at stripping away the not just the baggage, right, but the assumptions that come with us. Like we talked a little earlier about the assumption of the catechism and the Book of Common Prayer and the baptismal covenant. But to be able to say, gosh, if I had never heard, if I was someone outside the Episcopal Church and I had never heard of the baptismal covenant, how would you describe like those vows to someone? How would you describe that commitment to someone? Yeah, and in doing that, how would we describe the Eucharist to someone? That's kind of a coded word, or a word that you need some background to understand what's going to go on with that.
Right.
Yeah, how do we like look at the world as something fresh, but also that doesn't come with some of the language that we take for granted.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for giving us some time today, Reverend Katie.
This was awesome. Thanks.
I mean, it's always great to be together, but especially to kind of feel some energy around these things that I haven't felt in a while.
It's exciting. It's an exciting moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
A couple of takeaways I had from talking with Reverend Katie. First was that you got to know when you interview people over Zoom and go, aha, and it highlights your video and takes it away from there. So I learned that. But also, I really was surprised to come away feeling so energized from hearing her talk about the process. And I don't know about you, I don't always feel energized by mission and vision statements, but sometimes it happens. And I think that's when we've got the compelling part. Did anybody have a response to the video or something they wanted to share from that, or a question that they really honed in on? We can't see everybody, but you could put a note in chat.
Hey, this is Carolyn Crouch from St. John's Lafayette Square, and I apologize, I don't have my video on. I'm driving in my car, so you all don't want to see that. But I really resonated with Katie, and maybe you both highlighting, well, what's changed in the past year? And if you rethought, why would someone put a church at this site today? I mean, for St. John's Lafayette Square, that's a really profound question right now, because right around our church building, it's changed almost completely in context, because a year ago, we were in the pandemic, but then we morphed into, and we had a transformation into becoming part of Black Lives Matter Plaza, and everything that stands for, and just the energy, and really, I think the love that comes from that. So I found that incredibly exciting to go on that thought, potentially go on that thought excursion with our staff, our vestry, I'm on the vestry, and really ponder that question. Why would you put a church here? I mean, we are there obviously, but what does that mean for us now?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. And I mean, St. John's is in such a unique position geographically and historically, but we're all in a position like that, right? Communities are changing. Folks around us have begun the process of emerging slowly from the pandemic and figuring out how that's changed. Heidi put a comment in. I don't know, Heidi, if you wanted to unmute and say something about that comment.
I just really resonated with her discussion about who are you, because for us at All Souls, we had a really strong identity some decades ago, and our sense of who we are doesn't seem to be keeping pace with who our new members are. So that's something we're kind of looking at. How do we figure out who we really are, not just who we've gotten so used to thinking of ourselves as.
Well, that's really well said. And I think it's important to honor who we have been, right? I mean, we're not discarding that or discounting it. But at the same time, to honor who we have been is so important to being able to honor who we are today or who we're going to be, especially when it comes to welcoming the community around us and responding to them. Maybe I'll throw this out, and I invite you again, just continue to think about this. And if you have a comment, pop it in, or if you just want to take the mic, just say, hey, let me talk in chat. But I was thinking about, after my conversation with Katie, and we always, when it comes to mission and vision, we usually talk about mechanics, right? Like every statement has to have this. And depending on the books you read and the resources you turn to, people get really nitpicky about what mission and vision are, how they operate separately, how they operate together. My reading has tended to be in the business world around mission and vision, and I tried to bring it in to the church work I've done. However, I am not going to fight for any of those hills because we use the language interchangeably a lot between mission and vision. Some churches have a really long mission statement and a short vision, or a really short mission statement, a really long vision statement with pieces. Really kind of came away from my time with Katie going, making sure we do pay attention to who we are, pay close attention to who the people around us are, paying close attention to who Jesus is. I so appreciated that perspective and that centrality of Jesus informing that. Definitely talking about what we want to do outreach, the way that vision, typically mission is who we are, vision is what we're doing about it. So you've got a mission statement of this is our identity, and vision or visions of how we're going to act that out within our host communities or the targeted demographics that we're trying to reach. So I was thinking about, but what makes all those mechanics compelling? Right? How do we step from simply having a mission and vision statement, even an updated one with no grammatical errors, to one that is compelling and actually energizing, like I felt after my conversation with Reverend Katie? So I was thinking about 4 different aspects to that, bringing in that angle of being compelling. That first, we have crafted those statements together, okay, that we have them. And that's kind of baseline, but they are up to date. Okay, they do make sense. They're not from, say, 2 decades or 3 decades ago. Secondly, that we have alignment with our leadership. In other words, all the leaders know where to find them. They know what they are, and they agree to support them. And that's a big difference between simply agreeing to, say, be on vestry or take a leadership position within a ministry, to then agreeing to really support the vision of what that ministry or that committee is trying to support. In fact, in coaching, training, we talk about the difference between coaching groups and teams, and it's all about alignment. You can talk to a group all day long, but as soon as we share a mission and vision, we're a team. And that's a whole new dynamic. The third one is, how is it integrated into parish life? In other words, is it the vocabulary and language that leadership is using so that someone in the parish, someone sitting in a pew might actually give you that vision statement back verbatim? I'll tell you right now, as a church leader, lay or ordained, wherever you're leading or doing, the moment somebody gives you back your language like that, it is like your heart beats faster. It's like you're falling in love again, because it means that you're actually getting it into the DNA of a community, and it's super exciting. And the fourth piece is, the fourth aspect is there a piece of your mission and vision that is worded and written specifically for outsiders? In other words, it's invitational, it's quick and easy to say, and it is stripped of all the church language that's not going to make sense. And that's sort of what Reverend Katie was getting at there with, sometimes we embed too much of our church language in these statements, and they don't make sense anymore. They don't connect. They're no longer accessible to people coming from the outside. So we do have a quick poll, and is asking the question, as you reflect on those four aspects, and the poll is going to list the aspects for you. So don't worry about that. Again, that we simply do have updated, crafted mission and vision statements, that we have alignment with the leadership. The leaders all know where to find them. They agree to them. They support them. We've made steps to integrate it into parish life. And there's part of it that really speaks to outsiders. The question is, where would you like to see energy put in your parish and context around one of those aspects? And we can pull that poll up now, Emily, and we'll give it a minute or so. Yeah. With which aspect of having a compelling mission and vision would you like or need to apply some energy in your parish? There's no right or wrong answer here. But as you respond to these, we'll look at the answers. And actually, I'm kind of considering this my homework. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to continue to assemble and curate some resources around these things and send them out to all the registrants. And this is actually cool because I can see them coming in. 72% have voted. That's amazing turnout, no matter what your context.
Can you vote for more than one?
I think it's set up for one. So it's really the one that you would choose, the one that really rises to the top. All right, we're one short. That may be me. No, it doesn't count as, does it, Emily, because we're hosts. Awesome. We are 18 of 18 voted. So can we display the results for that now and see? The leader within our group, but by a fairly narrow margin, was making sure that there's a piece of the process especially designed for outsiders, follow close behind integrating into parish life. And that's really kind of cool, because those are actually two that I'd love to talk about. If y'all would like to speak about those, I would love to hear from you ways that you have done it. This is a safe place. If you have an idea of how you might accomplish one of those things, no matter how crazy it is, if you say it in this group, we're going to love you for it. We're not going to think it's nutty. Awesome. So we have really the top two, making sure there's a piece of the process especially designed for outsiders, and then integrating it into parish life. So that top one there on making sure there's a piece of the process designed for outsiders really kind of falls into the vision part of this, I think, at times. In other words, the things that we expect to be doing and valuing ministry-wise and aspect-wise to our communities to reflect who we are. I think, can we unspotlight me, Emily? Thank you for that. I love to see me, don't get me wrong, except sometimes my mustache looks weird in Zoom. I'm not sure about that. But I do like to see everybody else with the gallery view, so I can kind of look at your faces and be reminded we're all at the table having lunch together, right? Meredith, you're in here somewhere. I shot you an email the other day because okay, so you're a parish in the diocese. When we started coming to your parish, the first thing when I pulled up your website that I saw were the words joyful warmth. What did you mean by that? I'm gonna put you on the spot. I did not prep her for this, I promise.
No, you did not. I love you, Todd. Well, the interesting thing to say is that joyful warmth is something that has been tossed around quite a bit as we talk about our identity. And I'm a little embarrassed to say it's not as reflected in our mission and vision statements. In our vision statement, yes, there's joy, but the mission statement, not so much. So that's something interesting to reflect on. When you share with me that that's what stuck with you when you saw that on our webpage. So when we think of joyful warmth, it's this sense of hospitality and welcoming and a chance to come in and celebrate our relationship with God and with one another. And that is really key, I think, to the identity people feel at St. James.
Yeah. I mean, I will tell you honestly, when words like that are prominent, when they're used, when they're visible, and when they're front and center, they impart meaning to people, from guests to members. So when we visited, and I like to brag on St. James, although we've not been there through the pandemic, I miss you guys. That's where we tended to worship for a couple of years and have our membership. We made it into that building and we felt joyful warmth. There was something about it being front and center that people talked to us in the foyer, made sure we had our bulletins, we got to a pew. People were leaning over the pew to make sure that we stayed for coffee hour. I felt that that was an expression that was authentic. And here's the thing, I look at a lot of websites and I've looked at some of yours, and sometimes the very first thing you see is ways to donate. Sometimes the very first thing you see is some churchy language. And, you know, we're all there. We're trying to get this whole social media thing right and get this website thing right. But an action item to go forward with this would be to find within your mission and vision a phrase that makes sense to people who are not Christians. And think about ways to put that forward for them to see. Joyful warmth made sense to me, even thinking about it outside of church language and church circles. So when people approach your digital front door, your website, or your actual front door, is there something to resonate with them in the right language? Even if it is just looking at your website, when you pull it up, is the very first thing, at least the word welcome? Is the very first thing a greeting? Is the very first thing some kind of an expression? Years ago, when I was a pastor outside of the Episcopal Church, I was called to a church whose tagline on the website was an ecumenical community of faith. They loved that statement, y'all. And they were really mad when I asked them what in the world it meant, because even though I knew what all the words meant, I had no clue what that meant when I went to a church website. We actually changed it to not even a full sentence. We had two broken pieces of two sentence fragments. We simply said, followers of Christ, comma good neighbors in the world. So that people understand first who we are, that we're identifying with Christ. And second, what that means to us is that we ought to be good neighbors. That wasn't even the best one. I mean, that was just something we came up with where we were. But having some words out front for people matters. Elsie, you unmuted. Did you want to jump in?
No, I agree. I think the wording, as people open up the website, what they see first is so important, because that conveys the feelings not only of the parish, but if that parish is welcoming. And as one who would look at websites prior to visiting churches, that opening page really made an impact on my decision whether to visit that parish or not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guarantee you, when I was a pastor, the majority of our people after some time were coming to us because they found our website, and they had to feel some kind of sense of a connection there. Bishop.
Thanks, Todd, and hi, everyone. I wanted to reflect. This has been so great to hear you all reflect and to see your faces and names. One of the things that I was talking with the vestry of a church on Sunday, All Saints down in Oakley, Maryland. They're so excited about getting back into their building. They've done a lot of renovation on their building. They're hoping that the building renovation is going to bring people back to the church again. And I asked them why. Not so much for them, but what is it that they hoped for the people they were hoping would come to their church. And it kind of, because I was so struck by what you were in the interview, Todd, that like, what is it that we hope people will experience or receive or be a part of that isn't about what they can do for us and help us with their presence and their membership, but what is it that we genuinely want for them? And it's not that different, I would think, from what we want for ourselves. But that kind of language, I think, moves us in a mission mind quicker than anything else. When we try to imagine what God would want us to want for other people, right? And I even in our own diocesan mission and vision statements, I'm not 100% sure that we are as clear about that as we could be. So as you're thinking about how you're even speaking among yourselves or reflecting in your communities about those people that we hope will come, it's an interesting question to and to think about people in I think about my sons, right, and their lives and their families now, and what would I want for them if they were to find a faith community that they could call home. And so it's just been, I share it because it seems to resonate with the things we've been talking about, and it's been on my mind since Sunday, just as I think about this sweet little church in Southern Maryland, really needing people, otherwise they're not going to make it, they're too small to survive. But how do we turn that into a mission for the people of their communities? So thanks for listening.
I love that. I can't remember the book. Henry Nouwen wrote something in one of his books about that the metaphor he used for church was inviting friends to dinner. And, you know, one of the things he said about it was, first off, you need to be there. You need to show up if you invited them. And then second, you need to have something for them. You need to love them and appreciate them. And yeah, you brought that to mind. I was also going to say, be sure to love your webmaster at your parish, okay? Just a reminder, I am not at all attacking websites or webmasters. They're probably not paid. They're probably very passionate and they love your parish. So make sure you love on them, a lot. The second to the top, highest on our poll was integrating it with the parish. And that's where we can really get creative, I think, and find some new ways to engage with mission and vision. You know, we do have some preachers in the group today, so maybe it's a sermon or a sermon series around what it really means to bring that language into fruition. You know, Jesus talked a lot about what he came to do. You know, so many times people would say, let's go over here. And he'd say, actually, I'm going to go over there and preach, or I'm going to go over there and teach. And you know, he said, this is what I came for. I think of, the time when he was around Caesarea and the crowds had just mobbed him and he was healing and he went off to a quiet place by himself. The disciples came and found him finally and said, everybody's looking for you. And he said, let's go, because I got to preach in other villages. It's what I came to do. We can proclaim it. There's also creative ways to do it. I wanted to mention, and so we're going to send out a document either later today or tomorrow. And we're going to do this each week after our sessions during lunch. It's going to have links to recordings. You'll have a recording for the whole session. You'll have a recording to just the interview with Reverend Katie. And then there's a bunch of links and things listed out you can click on and go to. If you need help with the mechanics of writing mission and vision statements, it's there. And I'm sorry, Marianne, there's also a link to our mission and vision with the strategic plan in the diocese. Is on the website.
That's fine. I just, it's just a work in progress.
Absolutely. And yes, it always is, right? And I will tell you from my past reading in business books and the authors who have worked to bring the business language and mission and vision into church, mission tends to not change very much because that's core identity, right? Vision must change. Vision must change because it has to change with our context. And when I was growing up as a child, in fact, I think one of the books I read brought this up. Did anybody grow up in the heyday of bus ministries? So one of the first Bibles I have that I received in 1974 when I was 4 years old is a New Testament that in the front of it, it says, to Todd Thomas, a good bus worker. And I got that because my dad was one of the deacons who drove a church bus for our congregation. And I'm telling you, in the 70s, a church could run a bus out to a nearby community, pick up 80 kids with no permission slips and bring them to church, right? Put them through Sunday school, do whatever they planned, and then just run out and drop them back off on the street. Totally different day. But in my lifetime, I watched my church, which was sort of a suburban, larger church for the ones that I grew up in. We built a new wing to the building, educational wing, to house all these kids, right? With 3 floors. We started a Christian school in it. We did all this work. We built a huge paved parking lot with a fenced bus barn, a whole area for these buses. Go 10 years later, when I was 14, those buses sat in that chain link fence on the back corner of the parking lot. It was like overnight bus ministry stopped. Visions for how we do our work have to change with the context, the communities around us, but our mission stays the same. So talking about getting it integrated into our parishes, that is really fun and exciting work. And it's a place where you can do some creativity. You can do the preaching series. You can write some bulletin articles. You can also do some things visually. I was brought in a few years ago. Do we have anybody from St. John's Norwood with us today? So St. James and St. John's have been sort of in my satellite realm because we were living in downtown Bethesda and then Rockville, so we were right there together. But Reverend Sarah-Teague called me probably 4 or 5 years ago now and said, hey, would you come in as like a creative consult on this? They had done all this mission and vision work, and the document that we're putting together for today includes a link to their website for their mission and vision statements. Their vision statements, their visions come down to like 3 or 4 different things. The one that really stuck with me because I did this day with them was creating community at the crossroads of faith and life. So it's kind of like we're coming together, we're recognizing that we're bringing together all of ourselves, our whole lives, we're meeting together around faith, but that's not separate from life. And what we did is we went around and we had a professional photographer from the parish, me with my iPhone, and several volunteers from the parish. And we went around the area around that line between Chevy Chase and Bethesda. And we took some photos in parks. We had one of the young adults, a young lady from the church, who would stand at a bus stop with the bus sign with a messenger bag and a couple of things poking out of the top of her messenger bag, her iPhone, a copy of the Book of Common Prayer, and all these things. We staged these really neat photos. And then we went back to the parish and we all gathered around. I'll never forget this because we put a step ladder above the altar. And I was up on top with the photographer trying to frame and look down on this. And we're bumping their chancel cross and knocking gold flakes off of it. If anybody ever asked, it wasn't me. And we're getting photos of these different hands coming together around the Eucharist on top of the altar. These beautiful expressions visually of the community and of the faith, of regular life and life within the church community. And so what Sari wanted to do, and if you go by there, I'm not sure which one is up right now, but he invested a little bit of money to mount some things in their narthex, some posters and some words, so that when you go in at different times, you have different ones of these vision statements and these beautiful visual images of both the community around their church building and then the hands and objects from within their faith community. Go by and take a look at it. You'll see a photo on the website. We were pulling out all the stops. I was working full-time for Apple at that time, and I had this bracelet, you know, the saints bracelets with like all the saints or all the Mary and Jesuses. I had one that was rainbow colored peace signs all the way around. It got the most comments from anything I've ever worn in my entire life. And we pulled it off and put it on one of the hand actors. And you'll probably see my hand because you'll see my nail tattoo at one point, I think. It's really exciting, but you can do some visual things like that. Today, woe be to us if we invest the time and energy to make some beautiful images and graphics like that and don't put them out on Instagram, put them on our website. You know, something, again, love your webmaster, but if you pull up your website and the first image you see is an empty church building, and you know what I mean? It's a picture of our beautiful altar, but there's no people. what's that communicating to visitors, to guests who come to that? What's important? I pull up some of our websites and immediately there's a banner image of all these people together in coffee hour. Hey, I guarantee you, your first time guest is probably going to enjoy coffee hour more than worship, because that's where they're going to meet people. They're going to hear names. They're going to get their hand shaked. They're going to hear people ask their name and say it back to them. They're going to, experience relationship in new ways. And your worship may be amazing, but I'm not saying it's not. But give them an image of community on those websites and things to bring them in and kind of integrate that. So what I would ask, and we're coming up on about 12:50 here. We've got a few minutes left, and as Bishop Marianne said, it's great to hear everybody reflect and think about this. I'm wondering what you would take away as an action item from today. And when I was thinking about this, I thought about 3 questions. And again, this is going to be in your document that goes out, but I can type them in real quick. The first question is, do we need to redo the mission and vision statement? Has it been 10 years since they were done, since they were reviewed, since somebody really sat down and constituted a working group to say, who are we and what are we trying to do? If you were really captured by that idea of constituting a group to imagine there wasn't a church here and really set them free from past documents and past things to say, how are you going to learn who Jesus is in this place right now today? In Southeast DC, who is Jesus? In Prince George's County, who is Jesus? In Northern Montgomery County, who is Jesus? And who are the people around us? And how would we become a community that communicates to them? Is it just a review? Some of you have some amazing mission and vision statements. I'm just going to say that out loud. Every single time you read them, somebody can criticize it, okay? That doesn't mean it's not a great statement. It just means that we're all in process and processing. Some of you, I've seen them, you have great mission and vision statements, but they're relegated to pages on a bookshelf or a website. How do we review them and really refresh them for especially the leadership? And maybe it's the next vestry retreat to say, we're really going to review this and pray over it and pore over it and see what it looks like. Or maybe it is a re-present or a re-share. I've gone back and forth on different ways to talk about that one. But sharing is something we do today, right? Sometimes we overshare, but we hit that share button. When things come to us, we just share it along, sometimes too quick, but always because it said something to us, right? So how can we repackage, reshare, reintegrate these amazing vision statements and ministry ideas into the life of our parish, the life of our congregation, so that people begin speaking it back to us and carrying it out with them to people around them? So who in your parish can do this work? I see a few people making notes. Did a name come up to you? Did a name pop into your mind when we talked about creative ways to image those vision statements, to do projects like those posters? By the way, you can have full color vinyl banners made at Staples for like $50 and less. Did y'all know that? A few years ago, St. John's Norwood asked if we would help with their Pride Parade group and organize that. And they had this old school vinyl banner that had vinyl letters cut out and applied, because that's how we all used to do it, right? And they cost like hundreds of dollars. Staples can print a vinyl full color printed photographic banner for you for like $50. And then it's a few bucks to put grommets on it and tack it out somewhere. So maybe if you come up with that amazing vision statement, I know we're not all in our buildings and we're not all in all of our buildings, but you can present a beautiful banner to your community, reminding them of your love for them, of your prayers for them, of your hopes for them, of your aspirations. And you can hang them in the foyer. They look beautiful. Who's the graphic person in your parish who knows how to put together a beautiful image? Who knows your community? Who is the lifelong 40-year member, 80-year member of your parish who didn't move away over the years, who knows every corner of those neighborhoods that you can tap into and really find out what have you seen change in the past year, and really kind of bring them in and honor them and love them for their perspective. And then who is brand new to your community, who doesn't know what's going on, but what are their perceptions and how do they see you within the community? Roy dropped a comment in. You want to unmute and talk to that a little bit, Roy? I'm reading it and processing it. Oh, yeah. Go ahead and speak. You unmuted, but I don't hear you. All right, so let me read the comment for you. And then if you get that worked out, jump in with me. Roy wrote, one of the conflicts in creating or reshaping mission and vision is whether to reflect the parish today or something aspirational not there yet. Let me say that conflict is an opportunity. And the short answer is yes. You most definitely want to reflect who you are today. That's authenticity in its reality. But yes, you want to be aspirational, especially with those vision statements. Visions for doing ministry and what we want to accomplish are not always what we're accomplishing right now. Let's just own that. That's because we're human beings and we're in process. But we need to state it clearly. Sort of like that phrase, that very short phrase, joyful warmth. I would bet St. James doesn't hit that every Sunday morning. Because they're human beings, right? But to state it is to mean it. When I was a pastor, before the last church I led, I was sitting around one day and I got crazy and I pulled all their church bulletins from the 80s. And I'm like, I'm going to go through and I'm going to see what was happening, because I had over here a spreadsheet of what attendance and participation had been like through that time. And what their growth had been like. And honestly, during that time, they had been growing. So I went back and pulled the bulletins, and I found that all the bulletins that reflected sermon series on evangelism, sermon series on mission, sermon series on welcoming people, sermon series on the love of God expressed through community, they grew. It was almost like people listened to what we were talking about and then did it. And then parts of the year when they weren't doing those things, when they weren't talking about those things, when the bulletins didn't mention those things, when there was less evidence that they were aspirational and believing in something bigger than what they were that day, they weren't growing. And in fact, after that particular preacher had left, those topics didn't come up much at all, and there was decline. Now, some of that decline was definitely generational and time and chronological, but I have to believe that the words we use have meaning, and when we craft them and we plan them and we use them, they have to be authentic from who we are, but also aspirational from who God has called us to be. And we get those two right, and they balance together. We're almost at the top of the hour. I promise we're going to cut this off at 1 p.m. because I respect and love your time, and I've enjoyed being together with you. And I want you to come back next week too. Any other comments or anybody want to jump in? Last couple of minutes, you can just unmute and go for it if you want to.
I'm very inspired because we have a vestry retreat coming up in early May.
Yeah. We love vestry retreats. That's awesome. Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you for your input today. Marianne, I saw that you unmuted. I was going to ask you to pray us out in a moment, if you would, bless us out.
I just want to say that, there is the sort of big mission statement, vision statement reworking that is important to do. But even if that's not something that you have energy for, simply touching the purpose, the core purpose of any effort in the congregation before jumping into it is always liberating, right? And so, let's pick the classic, examples as we're moving into the summer, Vacation Bible School or some kind of summer offering, or as we're regathering, well, we have to start up again all the things that we weren't doing, that we haven't been able to do, and just to ask ourselves the purpose of those things and what we hope to accomplish and how we will know we have been fruitful or successful, so that we have some measurement, some way of measuring if we have accomplished what it was that we set forth to do. That very simple practice can help us to just guide us in ways. So as I was thinking of all the things you've shared, Todd, that it is that important vestry retreat, who are we kind of work, but it can also be little things, little efforts to anchor us toward that vision, that mission, that I know I can lose sight of just by the sense of like what has to get done. So I offer that as a closing thought, and thank you all, and you, Todd, for being part of this hour conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It is 1 o'clock. We will send some notes to you in the next, either this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning. We'll continue to curate resources around the poll answers and emphases, and hope to see you next week as we continue to dig through these. This was fun. Thank you. Marianne, you want to bless us out?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. So everyone, let's take a breath and let us pray. Gracious One, I hold before you each person here and the congregations they serve in gratitude for their desire to ponder more deeply the questions of why we do what we do, who we are, and who you are calling us to be. Thank you for the interview that Todd had that allowed us to reflect on questions of our sense of who Jesus is, our sense of how we articulate to ourselves and to others what it means to follow him, to help us scratch the surface of the things that have meaning and value to us, so that we might find language to translate that or to interpret that to others who we believe would benefit from knowing and loving you. Ask that you would take the thoughts and the ideas that we've shared and whatever they've stimulated in each of our minds to help us take the next step of some fruitful action, and bring us back together again, Lord, when we have an opportunity to touch upon other vital signs, so that we might consider the whole of what you have called us to do and to be as congregations serving you through the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. And all these things I ask on behalf of these gathered in your name and in the power of your Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bishop. Everybody be blessed. Diocesan staff is here to support, so reach out if you need anything.
Amen.
And thank
Thanks,
you, Emily,
everyone.
again.